Hello users, and welcome to another episodic installation of Above It All, the show where I bring to you important information. I don't care if this gets 5,000 dislikes, because all that really amounts to is money for me and not for thee. But this is the story, I guess, of the last 12 hours of what happened to, I believe his name is, Michael Reinoehl. So Vice published an interview with him, and I want to play a little segment of it, and then I want to read a thread and give you a bunch more information. But this guy gave an interview to Vice, and a warrant was filed for his arrest. And police, upon trying to arrest him, according to this is the problem with this story, is there's 5 different reports. One, they got into a shootout with Michael. One, Michael ran away. One, Michael pulled a gun on them and they killed him first. One, Michael was in the car. There's so many different stories here. So I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. I also don't condone the use of force, really, in many instances. I don't condone the use of force in the situation with Jay Bishop. Do I think using a gun for a deterrent may have been useful? Sure. Does that mean you should shoot them in the chest? Not necessarily. At the same time, Jay Bishop was a part of a far-right militia that was connected to a neo-Nazi that murdered Muslim people in Portland 2 to 3 years ago. So I don't really care that Jay Bishop died because he's garbage. But it shouldn't have happened. And this has unleashed a very, very, very unstable series of events. So, Donald Trump tweeted after Michael was killed. Donald Trump tweeted, "Why aren't the Portland police arresting the cold-blooded killer of blah, blah, blah? Do your job and do it fast. Everyone knows who this thug is. No wonder Portland is going to hell." This was tweeted as he was already dead. So, I personally wouldn't put it past any of these situations for U.S. Marshals raining this guy, 2, 3 SUVs, according to different reports. I wouldn't put it out of the question that this was an assassination or an execution. We already know the FBI released a memo in the early 2000s, not 2010s, not 2 months ago, about 15 plus years ago. The FBI released a memo that white nationalists and far-right Nazi militia members are high-ranking members of multiple law enforcement agencies. So I personally think that this was a retribution and execution for killing Jay Bishop. But I want to play a little tidbit of this clip here from Michael himself to give a little bit more context as to what this guy was saying.
And just to reiterate, you feel that it was totally justified?
Totally justified. Had I not acted,
I just want to keep you this guy is dead now. So this was posted an hour before this guy was massacred by being shot at least 40 times. There are conflicting reports, 40, 50, more than that. But it seems to have been he was shot at least 40 times, which is... we thought Jacob Blake being shot 7 times was excessive. Holy shit.
confident that my friend and I'm sure I would have been killed because I wasn't going to stand there and let something happen. What they've done is they're trying to make it look like we're all terrorists, and they're trying to make me look like a murderer. I've noticed that they keep saying that it's not clear that it's related to the protests. That's a lie.
For more context, I covered this the day of these protests. I made a video showcasing what the Trump people were doing. They were riding flatbed pickup trucks into Portland with no police presence and shooting with paintballs and pepper guns and bear mace at random civilians and protesters. So, do I think it's out of the question for someone to pull a gun on someone approaching them with bear mace? No, I don't. Do I think shooting them in the chest is out of the question? I mean, if there were signs that this guy had a gun, then no, I don't. But as far as I understand, Jay Bishop did not have a gun, or at least did not have a gun pointed at Michael here. So I do think shooting him was a little bit of a little trigger finger. And as this guy says, he says he was confident that he would be killed by these people. And I am very skeptical of that. But what I want to point out is this is what we have in America, where we have political candidates pointing guns at other politicians, saying that we need to defeat socialism and save America and stop the demon rats. We have vigilante militias murdering protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Donald Trump instigating this violence, as you can see here. There is a lot of problems here. The idea that this person, Michael, thought that someone approaching him with bear mace could result in his death and his friend's death, that I don't disbelieve. Because we are living in a society that is pitting us against each other for no reason. I have been saying this for a while now. This is 99% versus 1%. The 1% have convinced 20-ish, 30-ish% of the 99% that the rest of the 99% are the reason why they're losing their jobs. It's not the pandemic. It's Asian people. It's black people. It's brown people. It's not the corporate gangsters printing trillions of dollars for Exxon, Amazon, and other big corporations. No, 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 no. It's the homeless black woman on the street. It's her fault. And we have this atomized, hateful society. So I am not in any, do I think on an objective level that this guy should have feared for his life in that moment? I don't think so. But also, I wasn't in Portland that night. I wasn't dealing with Trump supporters going through the streets, beating people up, bear macing people in the face, shooting pepper balls and paint guns at people in the head, in the face, right? I wasn't there for that. So if I were there for that, with tensions escalating to that point, maybe I can understand why he felt that way. Now, again, I don't think lethal force is acceptable. I think it would have been better to pull a gun, to use to deter, and then run away. But that's not what happened. So again, I'm just bringing you the facts here. I know there's going to be a lot of triggered conservative crybabies that think I'm endorsing murder, but that's not the case here. I would prefer a non-violent, peaceful revolution. Hell, I supported Bernie Sanders, for God's sakes. But that's clearly not possible in this country at this point. And the only way that it would be possible is really if the far right gets their shit together.
They know that it's related to the protests. Not to mention the fact that they say that they don't know who it was. That's a lie. Within an hour, Facebook and Twitter and all that have my face and name labeled as the shooter. They want to paint a picture of Antifa having major involvement. A lot of people don't.
This part is really important, and I want you to listen to it.
Understand what Antifa represents. And if you just look at the basic definition of it, it's just anti-fascist. And I am 100% anti-fascist. I'm not a member of Antifa. I'm not a member of anything.
So that's really important, is that the media is spinning this as Antifa is like a big organization. It's like a global network of highly organized, centralized criminals and terrorists. That's not the case. Being anti-fascist means you are against tyranny from the government. And in a situation where you've got police killing people once a day in viral videos, that is tyranny from the government. So it doesn't mean that everyone who's Antifa is part of a criminal gang and network. I'm anti-fascist. Most people are anti-fascist. Generally the default position is anti-fascism. But somehow right-wing media has managed to concoct this bizarre story as if Antifa is some street gang, which is not even remotely correct. So I've got a thread here from It's Going Down that gives a very detailed description as to what was happening over the past week or so. And I want to read this thread, and I'll link it in the description. Hours after Vice News announced announced interview with Army veteran Michael Reinoehl, where he made his case that he acted in self-defense against violent far-right protesters invading Portland. Reinoehl was killed by U.S. Marshals Task Force outside Olympia, Washington. Oof. I'm sorry, I just ate, so I got the hiccups. Oh, God. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to edit that out. On August 29th, hundreds of highly armed Trump far-right groups converged outside of Portland and decided to go into the downtown. Now, again, I've said this. The people, Jay Bishop, the man who was killed, is on video promoting and defending a neo-Nazi murder. I think it was the Max train incident. You can look this up and you can watch my video about it. So it is factually, observably, and objectively true that these are far-right, Nazi-adjacent militias. Now, does that mean every single person with a Trump sticker on their car is a Nazi? No. They're probably a dullard. They're probably stupid. They probably have a low IQ, but that doesn't mean they're a Nazi. But these particular groups that were invading the streets of Portland were highly connected to far-right militias and neo-Nazi organizations, and that's what you need to understand. Have some nuance. Attendees were encouraged to conceal carry firearms. Police allowed the caravan into Portland focused on counter-protesters. Among the massive caravan, and there's links and sources to all of this stuff from its going down, and which is why this is such a good thread. Among the massive caravan were supporters of the pan-far-right group Patriot Prayer, a street-fighting formation allied with Proud Boys that frequently attracts open neo-Nazis, white nationalists. The group's main goal is to attack the left. Patriot Prayer rally attendees have also gone on to carry out acts of murder, such as Jeremy Christian, this is the Max train incident, who killed 2 people on a train and critically wounded a third after they attempted to stop him from harassing 2 young black women with anti-Muslim abuse. And Jay Bishop, the person who was killed by Michael Reinoehl, was directly defending that person, saying that, oh, he had every right to kill those black people. So again, I shed no tears at this point. Patriot Prayer leader Joey Gibson also has a history of working directly with the former Portland police chief. The relationship saw police giving Gibson information about anti-racist protesters, plus warning him of possible arrests against his followers. Gibson and his followers are obsessed with attacking anything they deem as representing Antifa, going as far as to attempt to assault Dem Socialist members at meetings, and many suspect vandalize an IWW Union Hall. On May 1st, 2019, members of Patriot Prayer attacked patrons outside of Cider Riot, a bar known for holding left-wing benefit shows and events. Evidence has since been brought to light that this may implicate Gibson in the attack, and he faces charges. An undercover liberal ex-vet soon released a report on the group which showed them coordinating with far-right troll Andy No. No doesn't film Patriot Prayer protests or protesters. There's an understanding that Patriot Prayer protects him and he protects them. On August of 2019, Patriot Prayer supporters teamed up with the Proud Boys, one of the groups which fought in Charlottesville, to hold a rally in Portland. In the build-up to the rally, leaders openly talked of violence and murder receiving FBI visits. This guy's shirt says, "I'm just here for the violence." While this was going on, leading member of Patriot Prayer and the local Proud Boys were also carrying out a string of random beatings and attacks against members of the public. Many of these acts of violence are connected to Tiny Toesi, Portland's Liberation, headed by a close friend of Joey Gibson, Haley Adams, sort of an island of unwanted Patriot Prayers toys, have also begun to organize, while being very open, this is kind of poorly worded a little bit, but the character limit, that they want to engage in acts of violence and murder against their enemies. Now again, you can look at all these sources for all this stuff. Over the years, Joey Gibson and others have both become obsessed with coming into Portland to attack those that live there, as well as depend on producing content out of these clashes to feed hungry fans. It's an industry. In the same desire to attack people in Portland, as a whole that fed into the drive of hundreds of Trump supporters on August 29th, which is when Jay Bishop was shot by Michael Reinoehl, to a caravan into Portland where they attacked people on the street with paintball guns, mace, and other weapons, as well as car attacks, as you can see here. Bike Portland wrote, as they powered through the streets, some of them sprayed bear mace and shot paintball guns indiscriminately on people as in the street. Huge trucks barreling through an intersection as people tried to slow them down, a bicycle under the wheels of a car. Portland Police Bureau failed to protect us from it. There were only a few arrests made, and the PPB didn't intervene strongly until after the caravan left. These people used their vehicles as weapons to terrorize Portlanders, and they faced no repercussions for doing so. White Trump supporters are treated with kid gloves, while anti-fascist BLM protesters are subdued by any means necessary. If Chief Lavelle plus Mayor Wheeler can't protect us from these armed, out-of-town, roving marauders in massive lifted 4x4s, they are not fit to do their jobs. During this mass armed invasion, Reinoehl stated to Vice that he went to aid a friend surrounded by trucks laden with armed Trump supporters. He found himself in confrontation with a man who says he threatened him plus another protester with a knife. Now again, the video is inconclusive. We know for a fact that these people were bear macing people, but we don't know if they were armed. Okay, so that is inconclusive. However, it is very possible. But again, I don't agree with using a gun to kill them. He said at the time the confrontation and shooting, there was no police present to help. There was definitely nobody in sight, no police officer, nobody at all that could intervene. It was a free-for-all, and the police were letting it happen, he said, which is accurate, given the news on the ground. Around 7 p.m. this evening, right around when Trump was tweeting asking why Reinoehl had not yet been arrested, a U.S. Marshals task force converged on the home where Reinoehl was staying at, and soon Reinoehl was dead. Trump, many Republicans, Tucker Carlson, and other leading figures on the right have praised and defended Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old Trump and Blue Lives Matter militia member who traveled to Kenosha and ended up killing 2 people, claiming that he acted in self-defense. Now again, if Kyle Rittenhouse is acting in self-defense in your opinion, then so is Michael Reinoehl. They are very similar cases. Excessive force for things that did not need to happen. And it's just, honestly, I think Michael Reinoehl has a higher case of self-defense than Kyle Rittenhouse. But either way, if you defend one and you don't defend both, it's a little bizarre. Okay, I'm just pointing that out. For Trump and his followers, both Kyle's drive to engage in armed vigilantism as well as kill 2 people that tried to stop him from hurting others was totally justified. On the other hand, they argue that the actions of Michael Forrest Reinoehl, who claims he was acting in self-defense to save his friend from an attack against far-right Trump supporters, who for hours had been attacking members of the public, was not self-defense but murder. Again, look at these t-shirts here. Both Trump and his supporters are signaling something very basic to everyone else in the run-up to the 2020 election. Both that they have a license to kill and that they only can defend themselves. The reality is compounded by national media outlets from Vice to the NYT, which parachutes into moments of revolt to solidify a neoliberal narrative, then dips, not covering that there has been a contentious escalation of far-right violence and attacks. As you can see, this shirt says Pinochet did nothing wrong. Just in the last several weeks, people on the far right and Trump supporters in Portland are suspected to have carried out 2 attempted pipe bomb attacks, 1 drive-by shooting, and also pulled out guns on counter-protesters during a large-scale rally. Meanwhile, Trump and Bill Barr play up a conspiracy theory of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, repeating verbatim the same talking points of the far right, that the real fascists are movements from below that threaten to disrupt capital and the status quo. Is this a photoshopped image of Barr? Because that can't be real. That can't be a real photo of Barr. He just looks like like the Mucinex guy in that photo. Yet legacy media remains stuck, a la Charlottesville, on the idea that violence is being escalated on both sides. This obviously literally overlooks basic reality. Over the past few months, the real violence has come from the state and far-right vigilantes. At the same time, both corporate parties and the mainstream media rush to put down the ongoing black-led rebellion that has erupted since the police murder of George Floyd, and which has only grown and continued in the face of continuous police brutality, terror, and killings. The Republicans see this as an opportunity to distract from the fact that the U.S. is falling apart, and over 187K people have died from COVID-19. From the bully pulpit, Trump, like the riot police of Kenosha, hopes to deputize his base to solidify power. The Democrats, on the other hand, know that they have the anything but Trump vote on lock and can attack the rebellion while still attempting to ride the wave of energy and anger created by it. Meanwhile, mass media continues to view the ongoing protests as somehow the creation of outside agitators, instead of the organic explosion of anger from young people who have lived through nothing but war, austerity, and police occupation. The ruling class is terrified of the exploited and excluded coming to understand themselves on their own terms, in terms of a class apart from those that rule and own the country, to understand that they have separate interests from theirs. Of course, at left-wing protests, you don't see death to Trump supporters on flags and t-shirts. You see Medicare for all. You see defund the police. You see end police brutality. Whereas in Trump-supporting circles, you see death to Antifa. And Pinochet did nothing wrong, and so on and so forth. So that's very interesting to note. Against this, they have two powerful tools. First is the power of the police, the prisons, the border guards, the detention centers, and the entire network of domination, imprisonment, surveillance, and repression. Second are those on the far right who are literally obsessed with Trump declaring civil war that would allow them to begin to engage in the violence and bloodlust that they have been fantasizing about for years. While the future looks grim, we reject the vision of the far right of a future in which the state pits one section of the population against each other, and that's what I was saying with 99 versus 1. The one have convinced 20 to 30 to hate the other segment of the 99, but that's not the case. We should all be unified against the corporate gangsters. If social movements from Standing Rock to the West Virginia teacher strike have shown us anything, it's that we have the power when we strike and act together. We need to continue to find ways of organizing ourselves and expressing that power collectively. Our lives depend on it. And I'm sorry that this is a long video, but I just try to give as much context here as I can, because I personally think a civil war is inevitable at this point. Reinoehl stated he had not turned himself in because he believed far-right protesters were collaborating with police who will not protect him or his family. He fears matched documented reality. Again, the FBI has known of white supremacists invading law enforcement since at least the early 2000s. Report from WAPO states that 4 police from 3 local agencies fired first. No mention of Reinoehl firing a gun. And this is where it gets interesting. It's because there's a lot of conflicting reports. Some that he was running away, some that he pulled a gun, some that he was still in the car. Nobody knows what actually happened, at least right now, and I'm sure more information will come. But what we do know is police executed a man. Whether or not he had a gun, 30 to 40 shots is ridiculous. But this highlighted text says at least 4 members of the task force fired at the suspect in a very brief amount of time, he said, as he approached his car around 7 p.m. When he fled, officers gave chase and then fired at him again. It was unclear whether the suspect ever fired a gun at police, Brady said. So we don't know what happened. But what we do know is the right-wing militias are coordinating with the state to kill people indiscriminately. Cops have been killing black people on camera in viral videos almost on a daily occurrence in the last couple of weeks. Kyle Rittenhouse's lawyer is pretending like Kyle Rittenhouse's George Washington and comparing him to the start of the American Revolution. Somehow being loyal to the government makes you a patriot, when in the American Revolution those loyal to the government were loyalists and the patriots fought against them. But this is one hell of a world that we live in. There are multiple sides that are trigger happy and afraid of each other, and the left has good reason to be afraid of the right, but the right does not have good reason to be afraid of the left. We should all work together to take down the corporate gangsters in the White House, in Congress, on Wall Street, and in corporate America. But instead, here we are, shooting and killing each other for hits and clicks on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Absolutely disgusting. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I tried to be as nuanced as possible here because the world really needs that at this point. So thank you. Share this video, and I will post all the sources in the description. Goodbye.